Thanks very much for taking the time to join us. I know it's getting on later in the day, and it's probably been a long day for you, so thanks very much for giving us your attention. We wanted to talk to you today about the premature failure of ironwork, which is an ongoing problem and has been for a long time, and also how that links into the subject of potholes, which potholes, right, is a big problem for you guys. So as you'll see on the screen there, there's some statistics here around potholes. They're a massive issue. They cause an awful lot of spending for local authorities. And I think what's sometimes overlooked is the correlation between ironwork in the highway and potholes that are either adjacent to the ironwork or very close to it. There's a couple of statistics on the right-hand side of the screen there which talk about 89% of access cover failures suffering foundation issues. And 44% of those cases, foundation issue was the sole cause of the failure. And they're two quotes from a report that was done by the WRC back in 2012, which is an independent body looking at the reason why ironwork fails on our road. And I'm going to come back to that very shortly. So if we look since 2012 up to the present day of how our road landscape has changed, it has changed quite a lot. We've got certainly more vehicles on the road. We've got heavier vehicles on the road now with EVs. We've got a lot more HGVs on the road. Roads are becoming narrower. Cars are becoming wider. So a lot of ironwork is more at risk now than it ever has been. If you think about gully gratings in curb lines, for example. So the more exposure that you have to ironwork by heavier vehicles, more frequently trafficking vehicles, the more at risk you are in terms of failure of that asset in the road. You've also got things like environmental changes. We've got colder winters, we've got longer downpours of rain, your budgets are getting lower, and like I just said a second ago, we've got wider vehicles. And this is the kind of thing that you can end up with. And there's a whole host of reasons as to why these types of premature failure happen, which I'm going to go into in a moment. But the overriding message behind our presentation today is that there's an understanding between the materials here. So there's the ironwork itself, there's the bedding mortar that sits around the frame of the ironwork, and then there's the reinstatement materials around that. And it's making sure that all those materials work together in harmony and are sympathetic to each other. And if you can make them sympathetic to each other as they're being trafficked under load over a long duration of time, then you've got much less chance of ending up with one of these scenarios here. So what is ironwork failing? The WRC says that there's three main categories, which are failure of the paved surround, which is the immediate surround around the edge of the ironwork. You've got the failure of support underneath the ironwork, and you've got the failure of the ironwork structure. The three more key stats from the WRC report. 52% of covers suffers from seat wear, which is where the cover drops in the frame. 44% suffer from failure of the paved surround. The 30% exhibit symptoms that indicate either failure of bedding material or failure of the manoid structure. So if you think about a piece of ironwork in a carriageway being trafficked by heavy loads, you think about the bedding material sitting around the frame itself, the flange at the base of the frame. There's two different ways that you can design iron products. You can design iron products with what we call high seating or low seating. And on the left-hand side, there's an example of a low-seated product. And what's happening there is that all the energy is being transferred from the load directly down to the base of the frame and into the flange. And you can see just at the base there, there's a lot of movement in the frame. So if you imagine that being encased in bedding mortar and all that movement happening, what's happening to that bedding mortar is it's under a lot of stress. And it's got to have the right properties and characteristics to be able to cope with that. If you look at the example on the right-hand side where there's a higher seated position in the frame, the stress that's going down into the frame and into the base, into the flange is actually a lot less, and the movement's a lot less. So just by moving the position of where your seat is, the cover sits in the frame, you can really make a difference to what happens to the frame as it's being loaded. In terms of the impact of failed ironwork to asset owners, there's a lot more to it than just cost. So if you're going out to replace or reinstate a piece of ironwork, there's obviously an upfront cost to that. But it's what else happens behind the scenes. When gangs go out to visit these sites, they're getting there in fossil fuel powered vehicles. They're getting out and they're using petrol powered or diesel powered flare saws and jackhammers. They're removing the products and then having to reinstate them with new materials. they're closing roads, they're using traffic management, there's idling traffic, there's impact on residents that can't get out of their driveways. It's a whole host of other impacts that come because of this issue. It's not just an upfront cost. So when we talk about sustainable ironwork, it's about how do we introduce a product? How do we use a product that we know is going to last, has been trialled and tested, and has got the right characteristics and the right design features to make sure it is sympathetic to the bedding water and all the other surrounding products and make it last a long time. We took an example here of one of our products, which is actually on the other side of the Multivo stand here. We've got a stand with this Unite gully grating. And if you compare the installation of a Unite gully grate to a typical gully grating, the cost will be more. It will cost you more to buy that product. And if you're using the right type of bedding material, that bedding material will cost you more than a more pop standard bedding material. But ultimately, we'll give it a 10-year warranty, and you've got 10 years peace of mind from the installation of that product. If you think about how many times you can go back and replace or reinstate that product in 10 years, through our calculations that we did in conjunction with Balfour Beatty some years ago, it worked out that it could be £9,000 per asset over a 10-year period that you could be spending to unnecessarily go back and replace a piece of ironwork. So the WRC, which was those guys that made that report back in 2012, they identified that there's 8 common modes of failure. So a mode of failure is a way that the product fails. That can be from the flexing of the cover to the point that it fractures. It could be that the cover's seized in the frame. It could be that it collapses in on itself. There's material defects. There's 8 in total. But that doesn't mean that all ironwork installations have to be a failure. There is a methodology that can be followed to make robust installations last a long time. And the key factors to this are making sure that the ironwork is correct to the right specification and it's got the right design features to make it last. The bedding and surfacing materials are of good quality. The chamber and chamber top condition is good. Quite often on remedial works, the previous piece of ironwork is removed, and then once it's replaced, the right type of ironwork's used, the right type of bedding materials used, but the chamber top is in good condition. So if you've got 2 of the 3 things right, the chamber top's not in good condition, ultimately it's going to fail. And then fourthly is workmanship. It's the quality of the workmanship, it's the technical training and understanding of how to install the products to make sure that they last. So coming back to this product that we have, the Unite manhole cover and Unite gully grating, this has been manufactured for over 20 years now. We've been supplying lots of utility companies across the country. Thames Water have been buying this for the last 17 years. We've sold over 500,000 units without a single reported failure. So we know that this is a long-standing piece of ironwork that works. I'm happy to demonstrate that with free trials for any local authority that wants to take us up on that. And when it's installed with the right approved bedding mortar, we'll offer you a 10-year warranty. So I'm going to touch on the standards. What do the standards around ironwork mean? Well, the problem is that standards are actually quite poor in this country for ironwork. So BSEN 124 is the standard that we'll work to. That's what the products are kite marked to. But it's effectively a static load test. And in the road, you don't get static loads. So when you've got heavy vehicles driving across, braking on, turning on ironwork, they're not delivering static loads, they're delivering dynamic loads. So the covers are being put under duress that they haven't been tested to or designed to. So it's about manufacturing products that exceed the standards that they're set to and understanding how they work in the real world, not just making them to a pretty flawed standard. And in an ideal scenario, what you'd have is the load coming down onto the product from above and the load being transferred sympathetically directly into the chamber below. And this is a little simulation of an unsympathetic piece of ironwork which is flexing a lot. There's a lot of movement in the frame. That's causing the cementitious mortar to break up from within. And then the crack will propagate from that bedding up to the top surface. And that's where you'll see the whole piece start to work itself out of the ground. And that's a really common thing you'd see on a lot of streets up and down the country. The WRC, the people that made this report, they made some recommendations and they said, we understand the reason why these pieces of ironwork are failing, and we think that there's some features that we should introduce into the product to make them last longer. They're not part of a standard as such, but they're features that would make really good sense. So we followed all of those recommendations. So we make sure that we've got large flange areas in the corners of our covers, which means that as the load transfers to the frame, there's a lot of surface area there taking up and absorbing that loading. We make sure that there's a texture on the surface of the flange as well, so that gives a better bonding adhesion to the bedding mortar and a larger surface area for the mortar to adhere to. This is a really important one, and unbelievably, there's some products out there that don't have it. Bracing gussets in the corners, webs. Look, a roof truss would have a bracing diagonally across a 90-degree product. It's really simple. If you don't have it, the flange is going to move around a lot. Products out there that don't have it, but the good products do. Everything that we do with our products on the Unite is rounded, so there's no sharp edges or cracks for energy to run to and propagate into the bedding material. So energy effectively keeps running around the product until it dissipates, and it dissipates into the bedding mortar, again, sympathetically. We've got lovely big structural beams under our covers to make sure that the load transferred really efficiently. And we've got really, really important mortar aperture, engagement apertures in the flange, which allow the bedding mortar to come up through the frame and bond around it. If you don't have these holes in the frame, you've got bedding mortar underneath the flange and bedding mortar on top of the flange, but it's not bonding through the frame. So the bedding mortar that sits on top of the flange is effectively quite expensive backfill. It's not doing anything. So it needs to bond through the frame, and it's really important that products have that feature. And then lastly is the support geometry. This was going back to that slide where it showed the two frames side by side and one was moving more than the other. It's about understanding where to position the covers in the frame. It's just good sound design principles that we make sure that we install that in all of our products.
I think that today.
So bedding materials is the next key thing. So you've got your ironwork, right? What's next? Well, the bedding material has to be of sufficient quality and have the right mechanical properties in order to withstand the loads that are being transferred through it. There's lots of different types of products out there on the market. We would always advocate for a polyester resin type material. The reason being, as you can see, there's lots of crosses and ticks on the screen here, but ultimately it's got super tensile and flexural properties. So if you've got a piece of ironwork that's bonded within a piece of polyester resin, if there is some movement within the frame, the polyester resin will absorb those movements far more efficiently than a cementitious mortar would do. Cement's great at compression. You put something inside it that wants to move, it's not very happy, and it'll break up from the inside out. So if you use polyester resin as opposed to a cementitious mortar, you'll get a much longer lasting, durable installation. Again, it will cost more than a cementitious mortar. So there's a higher cost today, but there's a lot of saving over a long period of time, which is what this is all about. It's innovation for whole life cost savings, not just looking at what it costs me right now. The chamber top condition, as I've mentioned, has to be in good condition. It has to be clean and dry and textured for the mortar to bond to. Has to make sure that there's sufficient height to get the frame in. It's all good common sense. It's just looking at the installation that you're undertaking and making sure that everything you're bedding onto is solid. CD534, which is the National Highways Compliance Specification, doesn't mention anything about bedding. It refers to another notation called Series 500, and this talks about the way that bedding should be used and the products that can and can't be used. And effectively, it suggests that anything that you use in the bedding as a packing material or as a chamber adjustment material should be homogeneous. So if it could be made of the same material as the bedding mortar, then you've got one happy, consistent material that will expand and contract at the same rate. So in different weather conditions through the year, you're going to get a similar rate of characteristics in the materials rather than having two products trying to work against each other and ultimately leading to a premature failure. And then lastly, again, it's the workmanship. So not reopening the road too early when the mortar's still green. It might be hard to the touch, but our touch can't represent an Arctic driving over a manhole cover and transferring loads into a bedding mortar. So it's understanding that the mortar needs time, follow the manufacturer's recommendations, use the right materials, use them correctly, make sure that they're not applied poorly. And all of this links to the fact that there is a lot of help and support out there in terms of training. So any local authority that we deal with, whether currently or in the future, We have extensive training campaigns that we will run for free. We'll happily come and train your guys how to use the products, and we'll do that as many times as is necessary. We'll do that with live site trials, so we'll provide product free of charge to come and help the guys understand how to use them and what they are, and use the right materials right first time. All you have to do is just get in touch with us. We'll happily support that. So if you get all that stuff right, what you can do is go from looking at the image on the left to the image on the right, where there's a lot less stress, a lot less movement in the ironwork itself. That's converting a lot less movement and stress into the surrounding mortar, and you've got a much better chance of that installation lasting for a much longer time. And where this has been proven to us as one of our case studies is at Piccadilly Circus down in London, which is one of the busiest junctions in the country. And we've got 5 Unite access covers there in that junction that have been there for 16 years, getting pummeled every day by buses, every type of vehicle you can imagine. And they're still there, still going strong. So we know it works, and we'd love for you guys, if you haven't already, to get in touch with us and see if we can help you, take you on the same sort of journey. And that's it for me, guys. Has anybody got any questions at all? No?
Oh.
Excellent. Well, if you think of anything, please come around the corner and see us. We're here for the rest of the day and all day tomorrow, and we'd love to speak to you some more. Thanks very much.